Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golden Key UWC's webinar, What Makes a Great Leader. My name is Tiamo Molele, the president of Golden Key UWC. And before we start, while we just let everybody join in, can you please just use the chat function just to let us know who you are and where you're from? It means in terms of provincial, just we're trying to just get a geographical understanding of where everybody that will be joining us today will be from. It's nice to meet you, Kristen from UCT. We see that we have all the way from Mpumalanga, Dr. Marule. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Simon. Simon from Rustenburg. Oh, my hometown. Welcome. From Bloemfontein, we have Olivia. Hi, Olivia. Oh, all the way from Rwanda. We have Joy. Welcome, Joy. And from the University of KZN, we seem to have Jenny joining us. Welcome, Jenny. From Ladysmith, we've got Michaela. Hi, Michaela. We've got a first-year medical student from UWC representing all the way from East London. Welcome, Siwa Piwe. We're very excited to have everybody joining. All the way from Potchefstroom, we've got Sia. Hi, Sia. From Force Luris. Hi, from Force Luris. Nosipo. Welcome, welcome. From Brakpan, we've got Alyssa. From Wits, we've got a Natasha. From Cape Town, we've got Yanela. Welcome, everybody. We've got another UCT student, Katleho. Hi, Katleho. All the way from East Rand, we've got Nicola. And then we've got another student from DUT, Durban University of Technology. Hi, Nutrition, hope you're well. Another student from UJ, she is Star. Hi, Star. Another representative from UWC, Hazy. I hope you enjoy. We've got another student from UP, another person from Mpumalanga. We also have Tama from Wits. Welcome, welcome. We have Nelson Mandela University students. Hey, Zenzo. Hi, Kyle. Welcome from Joburg. We've got a Cape Townian, Ashley. So that being said, I am just going to hand over to my vice president that is going to do an introduction to our speaker. Take it over.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Goni Mola, and I am currently serving as a vice president, as the president has spoken. So I would like to welcome everyone to our event tonight, What Makes a Great Leader. So the event will take, we'll walk the aspiring leaders through leadership skills they need to master as they grow in their respective leadership positions. In her words, our speaker for tonight said, I think a great leader is someone with a good grasp of life inside and outside of their leadership roles. So just a background on our speaker, Mahlodi Queen Hatle. Mahlodi Khatle, the founding director of Speak Kingdom Pty Ltd, is a young, intrepid African leader with a flair for the continent and its development goals. She is also a marketing specialist for Momentum Corporate. After slaying a national speaking competition in 2011 hosted by the TKV network, Mahlodi realized that her knack for speaking was simply an avenue for which she could create a global leadership academy located in Africa, driven by authentic leadership. This is the heart of Speak Kingdom, 100% Black women-owned social enterprise that specializes in the spoken word. Mahlodi participated in Obama Young African Leaders Initiative and ASRI Future Leaders Program in 2016. She holds a BCom honors degree from University of Pretoria, where she was the president of Golden Key International Honor Society. She obtained a certificate in public management from UNISA School of Business Leadership. So I would like everyone here to join hands together in welcoming our speaker for tonight, Mahlodi Speak Queen Hadley. Over to you, Mahlodi.
Hi, everybody. I sincerely hope that everyone is doing well, that you are blessed, that you are warm. Just from what Tiamo has been saying about where everyone comes from, sure, I am overwhelmed. And I think this speaks to the power and the magnitude of the Golden Key Society and its network throughout the country and throughout the globe. So it really is exciting to have everyone here today. I really would have loved for this to be an interactive session. So whenever I ask a question, and I will be asking a couple of questions throughout this talk, I would like you to just take a moment to introspect and also just send in your answer on the chat function. You can either say, yes, that's me, or yes, you know, I relate to this, or no, I've never experienced that. So let's try to keep the session as engaging as possible. And thank you so much once again to the young leaders at the UWC campus for this wonderful opportunity, and big ups to Golden Key, our home, for bringing us together on this online platform. So without further ado, I'll share my screen and we can kickstart the presentation. I hope to be no longer than 30 minutes to allow us to also have time to have a Q&A session at the end of my presentation. So let's get the show on the road. Mukoni, can you just give me an indication of whether you can see my screen before I start? Or anyone for that matter?
Yes, I can see your screen. And
Perfect.
maybe the attendees can also confirm in the chat.
You're all good. It's all perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. So something interesting happened to a father when he came back from work one day. He was looking forward to resting after having a really emotionally taxing day at work. And the minute he walked through the door, his son came running up to him, asking if they could play. And the father said, "Oh, my son, I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I've had a long day at work. I just want to rest." And the son said, "But Dad, you promised that we would get some time to play when you came back from work." And so the son found a quick fix. He remembered a puzzle that he had bought many moons ago. And this puzzle was in fact a 1,000-piece puzzle of the world map. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with geography and global spaces and the world map, but can you imagine trying to put together 1,000 different pieces that bring the globe together? I personally can't imagine what a task like that would be, let alone putting together the map of Africa. To this day, I still struggle with knowing and memorizing the places and the points for all 52 countries in our own continent. Now, can you imagine what that task must have been like for the world map? So the father then said to his son, "My son, I'm giving you a task to put together this 1,000-piece puzzle of the world map. And if you can do that, then we'll play." Now the son looked at this puzzle and there were 1,000 pieces scattered, tiny pieces, and he didn't know where to start. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matlodi Speakwin Khatle. And I live by one philosophy, which is a heart for society, a mind for solutions, and a soul for speaking. And as I've been rightfully introduced, today I want to challenge you to look at leadership through a different lens by asking yourself, what makes a great leader? And to help us answer this question, I position the story of a father and a son that's got this mammoth task of putting together 1,000 pieces of the world map. Do you have any idea how he could have done this? Well, to answer the question, let's first go through some questions. And I would like us to type in the answers in the chat function and use this as an opportunity to introspect. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to say anything about you. But I want each of us to honestly answer the 3 questions that you see on the screen right now. And the first question is, I sometimes feel like the weekend is not enough resting time for me. Now, please answer honestly. I'm not going to judge you. Natasha, please don't judge and revoke people's Golden Key membership. No one's membership is going to be revoked. I just want to get a sense of how people feel. And the second question is, I sometimes feel that it's impossible to meet some deadlines. I know with myself personally, handling work, handling a business, and also trying to start a family can be a bit hectic. But do you also feel the same way? And the third question is, I sometimes felt that I'm expected to keep things together. Like I'm expected to know things. I'm expected to just hold it together. Have you answered the question? Have you answered honestly? Have you answered frankly? So the reason I've asked these questions is because I think that as leaders, and I believe that everyone that's tuned in today is a leader in their own right. You might be a leader of a company, you might be a leader in academia, you might be the leader in the public sector. Whichever sphere that you find yourself having an influence in, you might be a leader. You might be a leader in your family. I know as a firstborn child, one of my first leadership roles was being an older sister, sometimes not having the answers, sometimes not having my own life altogether, but feeling that I had this big responsibility to lead. And so I think that we need a paradigm shift. And the reason I say that is because of the following observations that I've made over time about leadership. Now, the first one comes from the World Economic Forum that says that African leaders actually suffer from bad management of public resources. And you ask yourself why that could be the case. Is it that these people are not well equipped to manage the state? Is it that these people perhaps lack the credibility? What is the actual root of the problem? A second observation that I made, and this comes from the Small Business Trends website, says that leaders can't maintain a work-life balance. And a third observation that I made, which came very recently, very suddenly, and very unfortunately, was when a friend of mine who's studying overseas had to come back home because he was declared mentally unable to continue with his doctoral studies. As a result of that, he's had to put his academics on hold to focus on his well-being. This also reminds me of a book that I once read by the late Paul Kalanithi, who unfortunately succumbed to cancer, something that he could have found in the early stages. But unfortunately, because of just going on every day on autopilot, putting things on hold, putting family on hold, putting plans on hold in order to be a leader in his sphere as a neurosurgeon. He was unable to attend to the cancer. And it is said that leaders are actually not coping with mental and physical wellness. These observations then make me think, could it be that leaders have actually chewed more than they could take? Could it be that many of us are pouring from an empty cup? Now, what you see on screen is a cup that clearly had coffee, could have been tea, and clearly was once at a point where it was full to the brim. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in an economic, political climate, and even in our everyday lives, where leaders are now pouring from empty cups. This is a situation where leaders always give and don't take time to replenish and restore themselves, to do it to a point where they feel that they can actually give from the overflow. And this is the paradigm shift that I would like to propose, that as young, upcoming leaders, we start taking a serious stance on our personal development so that we can become great leaders. And I know you're probably sitting here thinking, oh, but wow, I was hoping to learn about the 5 steps to become a great leader. I'm sure we all know about this. Stephen Covey has written extensively about great leadership in his book, The 8 Characteristics of Effective Leadership. And there's multiple publications about leadership and what it means in different spheres. But today I want us to focus on you, the person tuning in to this webinar this evening. I don't think there's a single one of us sitting here today who really don't know what it takes to be a good leader, because we're in these positions because somebody identified us to have 1 or 2 or more traits to fill these spaces. But now I would like to postulate something and give you food for thought about you and what you have consistently brought to the table. I think what makes a good leader is somebody who has a good grasp on life, both inside and outside of their leadership roles. And this is something that's called personal mastery. So if you've never had the opportunity to come across the term personal mastery, Andrew Bryant defines it as living and working purposefully towards a vision in alignment with one's values, in a state of constant learning about oneself and the reality in which one exists. So I think as leaders, in an effort to make the world a better place, we found ourselves running from one project to the next, and before we know it, we're burnt out. So you're probably asking, how do I practice this purposeful living in order to be a great leader? I propose 3 things. 1, do you have your personal vision statement that guides you? 2, are you mindful of your time? And 3, do you have a well thought out leadership approach. So over the next few slides, I'll be delving into each of these three proponents of personal mastery in an effort to help you realize that the minute you master self, you can master leadership. And the first one really is your personal vision statement, your vision statement. So every company and organization that we go into has a vision statement. Golden Key has its own set of philosophies and values that are guided by this vision statement. As leaders in the Golden Key Honor Society at the UWC chapter, even you know that when you joined the chapter as young leaders, there are certain sets of values that you needed to abide by to make sure that Golden Key grows. But what about your personal vision statement? I feel that a lot of young leaders go out into the world vulnerably. They go out with a passion, a strong passion to save the world and to do great things. But the passion is not guided by a vision statement. So when I started the program, or the presentation rather, I mentioned that I'm driven by a heart for society, a mind for solutions, and a soul for speaking. So my challenge to you is, what is your vision statement? So maybe you can put down in the chat function if you have a vision statement, or if not, why not? If yes, what is it? Can you share that with us? I believe that each of us should be able to do a project person audit or evaluation. Sit down with the projects that you're involved with in a leadership capacity. It might not all be front row leadership, but maybe you're part of a leadership team. And introspect. Find out if this project is indeed aligned with your person, your personal vision statement. To avoid a situation where you go from one project to the next, running yourself into a hole of burnout. But at the end of the day, looking back and thinking, was it all really worth it? Was it aligned at all with my personal values? And I guess then the big question that you ask yourself under this item is this initiative in line with my personal vision statement? And the second thing that we mentioned is your time. Your time. Your time. Your time. I recently had an encounter with my business partner who couldn't show up for one meeting. That was excusable, but after it happened for about 4 successive meetings that she could not come to, we had to then sit down and lay all the cards on the table and find out exactly what the reason was that she couldn't attend these meetings. What we found was that she was signed up for so many other initiatives that she was then struggling with capacity. Your time. Are you using your time effectively for those things that matter? Because ultimately, it's not about the quantity of projects that you're involved in, but the quality with which you are able to deliver. And that would be the hallmark of your leadership. That will be the hallmark of how you presented yourself in that project. On this issue of time, I also want us to zone into something called holistic development. Now, in the beginning, I mentioned a story of the late Paul Kalinithi, may his soul rest in peace. And he was a neurosurgeon who studied years and years for this qualification. He was actually even on the road to receiving a Nobel Peace Prize for some of the efforts that he had made in his academic journey. Unfortunately, during his studies, he had a couple of aches and pains in his body. He could feel it every day. Every single day was taking its toll on him. But he just brushed it under the carpet and thought, I'll see this. I'm a leader in this department, so I need to push my deadlines. I need to lead. I need to get things done. But at the same time, his family was suffering. They weren't seeing as much of him as they wanted to. And unfortunately, he succumbed. Are we taking stock of our presence in our lives outside of our leadership commitments? Now, what you see on the screen is the wheel of life. And I'm sure that there are psychologists who are more trained to explain what this means. But ultimately, I believe that a great leader is somebody that has a good grasp of each and every one of these areas. The aim is not to be perfect, it's to be human. So for me, it doesn't help that in your occupation, you rank as the highest in knowledge, in skills, in theory, and in practice. But when it comes to your social life, you are lacking. When it comes to your physical life, you are lacking. Emotionally lacking. Because then what that does is it exposes you to a risk of mental instability. I believe that leaders, more so today than any other time in our generation, need to focus on holistic development. An approach that can allow you to make time for your loved ones. An approach that can allow you to make time for your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being. An approach that can allow you to make time for your finances, whatever it may be that's outside of your direct sphere of influence. Make time for those things, because ultimately, your life should be lived holistically. And the big question here is, do I have capacity? This is the question that you need to ask yourself every time you're tasked with a responsibility under your leadership. Do I have capacity to go on this next project? Do I have capacity to be there for my family? Do I have capacity to show up? Or is my life just one piece of the puzzle? And the third thing that I think we should focus on is our approach on leadership. Do you have a superhero mentality of saving the world? Or do you have a serving mentality? So I take it from the book of Matthew in the Bible that says, the greatest amongst us is our servant. And so if servitude is below you, then leadership is beyond you. So the big question that you need to be asking here is, do I have a superhero mentality of saving rather than serving? Because if you have the mentality of saving as a leader, you'll constantly feel the need to put your name on every project. Every single project needs to have your name on it because there's something that you need to save. And what that does is, even of your tenure, you don't feel you've done enough because you haven't saved them. And is this not the same thing that we're possibly witnessing on our very own continent, in the African continent? Is it not the same problem that we're having with African leaders who are content with spending an entire lifetime on cabinet, not making room for young people to grow into those leadership spaces, not making space for anyone other than themselves, because they believe that they are the ones called upon to save And it can be arguable because of the rate at which corruption is happening in our continent. But I believe at the underlying root of this issue is the saving mentality. I need to save these people from something. I need to save them. And if I'm not there, no one else is going to do it. Therefore, I don't feel comfortable giving this baton over to someone else because they just won't see it. They just will not see it. How about as leaders, we develop an approach of serving? Because when you serve, you understand that it's only for a term. I'm serving. And when that term is over, it's time to take a bow. I want us to go back to the story of father and son. You'll remember when I started that the son had this mammoth task of completing the world map puzzle made up of 1,000 small pieces. How do you think the son solved this puzzle? Well, as he was trying to strategically place all these pieces, he noticed something. He noticed that when you turn one piece of the puzzle around, it shows a feature, a facial feature, a feature of a man. And then what he started doing was turning all the pieces of the puzzle around, because he realized that not only was this one puzzle, it was actually two puzzles back to back. And before he knew it, he had turned around all 1,000 pieces of the puzzle. And guess what he found out? The boy found out that if I put the man back together, I can actually put the world back together. And I think that's the challenge for great leadership today. If we focus on personal mastery, aligning our personal vision statement, using our time efficiently, and aiming to serve the world rather than save the world, we will have mastered ourselves as individuals. And before we know it, we become the change that we want to see. And ultimately, we will be able to be the leaders of this world. So with that said, I want to challenge you today to take a different lens through which you view leadership and its landscape. To put your pieces of your puzzle together, and before you know it, the world will come together. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matlodi Speak Queen Khatle, and I thank you for the opportunity. I would like to take some questions and possibly engage further on what I've shared today. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Matlodi, for that mammoth of information, and I'm truly inspired, like from what you just said. And you have so many people that have been engaging in our chat boxes. So if you can just have a look there. I've been asking the questions that you've been posing to our attendees, and they have been very, very interactive in terms of answering them. What I will do just for a brief sake is that I will just run through some of before I go to the questions, just some of the the things that people have said, and I'm sure you can see them too, but just for those people that will be watching, because I've seen also people have been asking if they could to requesting to get the presentation, and I just want to let everybody know that this webinar will be provided to you on the Golden Key Southern African YouTube, so you can catch it there if you had any internet connections or whatever and you want to show your friends. So for that, the questions that to answer your question one, I'm trying to scroll, there's a lot, so I'm just going to give you a couple of things. A lot of people were answering yes to number one. They also feel very overwhelmed by all the tasks that are ahead of them. And with regards to question two, some people think that they have an edge. For example, Didinke Choche says that for number two, that no, she feels that I have the edge that is at the end of that has been done. And more people have been just saying yes and yes, and I'm just scrolling. And somebody said for question three, a lot of them feel no, and then with regards to question one, a lot of them feel that they don't use their weekends for resting time. They only rest when they're tired, and this was from apologies for the name, it's Zayona Nisa Ali. That was from her. As I continue scrolling down, you got a lot of yeses, a lot of no's. So with that, I'm just going to go now to move on to our Q&As. And because everybody's responding very nicely to what you've said, and like Nicola Babrick said, I have been going through most of my life with the general goal of helping people, but I've also recently noticed that it really needs to be narrowed down, and if I'm going, I'm going to make it a real impact. And some like a Benson said time management has always been a challenge, especially during times of COVID. And yes, okay, now moving on to the questions. We've got amazing questions. I'm going to start off with Miss Ali. Miss Ali, I'm very bad at pronouncing your name, so I hope the surname will go. She actually has two questions for you. The first one is, she really likes the personal vision statement that you mentioned, and she wants to know, well, they want to know how this complements leadership. That's the first one. And then the second one was, why in academia leadership roles are defined? Why is it that in academia leadership roles are defined by our titles, meaning our academic ranking? And they continue to say, in my opinion, it does not necessarily reflect on the skills and the competencies needed for leadership. So they would really love to hear your thoughts on leadership roles based on academia ranking. Yeah, those are the two questions from Ali.
All right, can I answer those now?
Yes, please.
Right, fantastic. Thanks, Ali. Thanks for your question. The first one, how does a personal vision statement influence leadership? So, like I mentioned in the presentation, that we go into organizations that already have a preordained or a preset number of values that influence the vision of the company. So think about any organization under which you've served. It has its own value statement and it has its own mission and vision statement. And now, how your personal vision statement plays a role is you won't find yourself serving in organizations that have a vision statement that is contrary to yours. And now why this is important, if you look at, and I don't want to be controversial, I don't want to use this opportunity to be controversial, so I won't name drop any parties or any specific people's names, but let's look at the political landscape for an example. if you as an astute, honest, candid, and patriotic citizen, if that is your value statement, if that is your vision for where you are going as a young person, your personal vision, would you ascribe or subscribe to a political party that does not have the same vision statement? And would you then want to serve under that political party? So sometimes we find ourselves at big loggerheads where we believe in one thing and the organization that we serve believes in another. But if personally you don't think that you can marry the two, then it's not a safe space to play in. So it's always better to have your own predetermined set of values before you serve under any organization, because your personal vision statement will guide you, and that will be the compass through which you serve in various institutions. And you will know when an organization has reached its end, when it has reached its pinnacle, and you'll know that it's actually time for you to bow out here because this is no longer aligned with my personal vision statement. So I think, and I hope I've answered the question. Is there any way that we can find out, Tiamo, from the participants if they feel satisfied with the responses? Otherwise,
yes, they texted me and they informed me that the shorter version of the name would be Z. So Z, if you can just in the chat box just let us know if you're satisfied with the answer of that, and I'm going to move on to our
I
next
haven't
question.
answered the second question.
Oh, okay, the second one, okay.
Can you please just remind me?
Okay. The second question was with regards to in academia. You see how in academia, leadership roles and ranking, that was the second one.
I think it's just a global standard. It's a global standard to create some form of merit system. It's not to say that it's right, but I think time immemorial, we've always glorified people that are intelligent according to one understanding of intelligence. If you look at the Albert Einsteins of the world, they set that understanding globally of what it means to be intelligent, and ultimately the whole world just needed to follow suit according to that level of what is deemed intelligence. And unfortunately that hasn't been relooked or reviewed because there's different kinds of intelligence. As Dee rightfully said, it's not the best measure of whether one should be a leader or not, because there's a whole other world of leadership and your personal attributes and your soft skills that actually influence your propensity to lead. So it just happens to be a standard that the world has agreed upon, and I personally don't agree as well, like Z has said. So yes, next question.
Yes. I think, yeah, that in terms of like academic ranking, that's one thing. I think it was just because it's you know, sometimes we just need a blueprint to move on. And just to set a benchmark. I think maybe that's how, maybe in the future, we need the likes of Z to come now and change how the idea of how academically sound and structure should be. Right. So I'm going to move on. So here, there's a lot of people that want to know in terms of having a personal vision statement. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to kind of like round up all the questions that they have in terms of personal vision statement, because they're kind of one and the same. So I'm going to start with the basic one is, how do you really develop a good and a sound personal vision statement? Right. And then with that, how do you also, what are the components that we need that we can use to put in our personal vision statement?
Right. And so I'll share my screen. Can I answer that, or are you still rounding up?
There's one more. Yeah, because there was a lot. So I just wanted you to touch on personal vision statement all at once. So if you can just note what I'm saying and then you just give us a whole sum up, is that okay with you?
Perfect.
So basically the first one is how do you actually get a good and a sound personal vision statement? And the second one is the components that are needed for that personal vision statement. And then the third one is how would one go about editing and making sure that their personal statement is as efficient and as specific as possible.
Okay.
Yes, those are. And then also, if you could give us an example of what a personal vision statement looks like.
All right. Okay.
Yes, those are that in terms of
Thank you, Tiam. Thank you, Tiam. Much appreciated. I'll start with the example of a vision statement. And to do that, I would like to share my screen. So if you give me a moment, I'd like to go to my LinkedIn.
No problem. While you share your screen, I'll just in the meantime just give you some comments that people have been saying. And somebody says, Dieta said that they set their personal goals ridiculously high, so that when it's time to fail, I fail above everybody else's success. So essentially, they have like a high benchmark, so that if they don't get it, at least they are better than everybody else. That's from Dieta Makhohlwa.
Okay, that's an interesting approach.
Very, very interesting.
All right, I've got it here. So I'll just share my screen. So what everyone is looking at now is my personal vision statement, which I have summarized so that it makes sense for me and that it's something that I can revise or rather say to myself as an affirmation to myself on a daily basis. So it doesn't have to be anything complex. When we think about organizational visions, to be the most 1, 2, 3, XYZ, it doesn't have to be something complex. I think the effectiveness of a vision statement is directly proportional to the ability that you have to make it come alive. And for me, it's based on 3 things: society, solutions, and speaking. So somebody asked, what are the components of a vision statement? I'd say the best place to start would be with your personal values. We all have a number of things that we value. For example, some people value family, they value love, they value trust. We value different things. So take all the things that you value, put them down on a paper, and just list them. And with a process of elimination, choose the most burning of those values. It can be 1. For me, it was 3. So for you, it could be 1 value. And from that value, you can then craft a statement around that value. So the same way that organizations, and I speak about organizations a lot because I'm passionate about business. So the same way that organizations go through the process of crafting their vision statement is the same way that human beings should also be doing. You take the things that matter to you and compose a statement that will guide and direct you. And this is the statement that will make sure that you maintain the right kinds of relationships to help you to edify and speak to your vision statement. I'm not sure how many times, and I've mentioned also in the presentation, where you find yourself in the thick of a project and you don't know, how did I even get involved in this project? I mean, yes, it adds value, but is it Am I gaining anything from this? Or do I feel any form of accomplishment or fulfillment? Am I actually speaking to my purpose involving myself in this initiative? And ultimately, it goes to your vision statement. So if I'm answering the question, what the components of a vision statement are, it's your values, what you value as a person. And then look at a way into how you can craft that into a statement and make it as simple as possible. The best thing about this is it needs to be something that's personal to you. Doesn't have to be complex, needs to be something that you can say every day as a mantra, as an affirmation to yourself. And how do you edit your vision to be efficient and effective? So this goes back to the crafting. It's not something that's going to come overnight. For a lot of people, and I think companies as well, they've had to go through multiple iterations of the vision to finally get a good grasp of what it is that they aspire to be and they aspire to be involved in. So my challenge today for you is to introspect on all the projects that you're involved in, introspect on all the things that speak deeply to your purpose, and find out if there are key takeaways from each of those areas. And I think as you sit down and start thinking more critically about it, it will come to you slowly but surely. And I love the question because the person asked, I forgot the name, the person asked now, how do you edit it? And that's the goal of personal mastery. It's living actively and purposefully, which are all present continuous verbs, which mean that you continue to edify it as time goes on. When you find yourself in projects that no longer serve you or serve the community according to your ambitions, then you can always go back to the drawing board and alter it. So I think the beauty is in making it as true to yourself as possible and allowing yourself to grow with time. And another thing that I want to mention under this point is it's not cast in stone. So you can appreciate different things at different phases of your life. I know for a fact that when I'm a mother, I don't think that all of these will take top priority. Maybe I'll add in another dimension that says passion for family or something along those lines. So allow it to be an iterative process. It's like an art form. Allow it to be iterative and speak to where you are at the current moment. But it mustn't be so flexible that it's subject to change with every engagement. So every time when you're involved in something new, it changes. It needs to almost cover all the aspects of your development. I don't want to labor the point further because I'm looking at time and I think we also have more questions.
Totally, yes, we do have so many questions. There are still a couple of questions in terms of personal branding and whatnot, but I think we can always come back to them because there are some other questions. I will give credit to everybody that asked their questions at the end of the question series. So don't think if I didn't mention your name in the question, don't worry, you're still gonna come up. So we have one from, and basically it's still kind of similar to the vision statement situation. They want to find out how different or how similar is creating and formulating a vision statement to a vision board. That's one thing. And then another thing that Rufumo asked is that isn't your vision isn't when you look at yourself as a vision, isn't you treating yourself as a brand? And can everybody treat themselves as such a brand? They made an example saying, say my career is something that's in the background, like an engineer. in my view, being a brand makes more sense if you are a speaker and artist, and that is your image of your business. So if you can just give clarity and answer Rufumo and Tia's question.
Okay, I'll start with Tia's question, which was the alignment between your vision statement and your vision board. And I love that question. I absolutely love that question. I actually want to go back to the slides and show you something. So I had this slide here that talks about holistic development as a leader. And if you look at the slide, it talks about the 8 areas of personal development. And these are the 8 areas that one would ideally include when they do a vision board for themselves. So you could also use this as a proponent of your vision statement. Say, for example, you sit down and you're busy jotting down and mapping out all the various areas of your life. When you put that together, it should make some form of sense to you. And I believe no 2 people can have exactly the same vision because we have different perspectives on life. So when you've done a vision board, it's so much easier to then craft a vision statement because you know exactly what matters to you across all 8 areas. So I want to say that the vision board is not a vision statement, but the 2 can go hand in hand. So if you can align your board with your statement, great stuff. And the beauty about a vision board is it also flows with an iterative process. You never have a vision board for 5 years and keep it as is for all 5 years, not even 6 months. I mean, I was in a process a couple of months ago, I think 2 months back, where I was doing a review on my vision board and just taking out, adapting, adjusting, and updating my current vision board to match up with what's more important to me now. So the 2 work hand in glove. And to Reformo's question about branding and people being brands, that's absolutely spot on. I actually want to say to Reformo, you missed out on a session that we had with UWC. Tiamo, you'll remind me when we had this session on personal branding. And personal branding is a big component of leadership. And now it's not to say that you're branding yourself as an engineer, but you taking your vision statement and what you believe in, what you believe your purpose. So even though you are an engineer, for example, you're not limiting yourself to engineer. Maybe you're a civil engineer that's passionate about spaces and building safe spaces for people. So maybe then your vision statement is building safe spaces for a safe South Africa. And you can couple that with so many other elements that can speak to the things that matter to you as a person. Because I don't believe you do engineering just because it's something you can do. You do it because there's something that feeds into that thing. There's that thing that wants you to be an engineer because you just want things to be safer and well calculated. So yes, you won't be treating yourself like a static brand like Coca-Cola, for example, but it's about being intentional about the things that you do. Tiamo, over to you.
Oh, that is very, very, very powerful. I love the being intentful part. And with regards to the branding, we had the branding webinar in June. So I think, yeah, I totally really agree with what you're saying. And there's one thing that I could add in terms of it was Tia's addition in terms of the question. They just wanted to. I think maybe you've touched this. They wanted to understand the introspection that is required for you to create a vision statement. Just ponder on that while I move on to the next, because I want to give you these questions in a little bulky situation so that you give us more of the fruit that is within there. So we've got an anonymous person that just wants to thank you for your amazingness, and they just want to find out, how do you deal with people who do not share the same servitude approach as yourself. And while we are looking at that, there's another question from Natasha. Yeah, they want to find out that when you are faced with conflicts in your workplace, do you always defend yourself or do you leave it? And how do leaders manage this situation? And the next one is from Mr. or Mrs. Gaia, Talita. They want to find out, how does one either maintain or implement a self-care without seeming to be selfish? Because, you know, some people, when you say you're doing a self-care Sunday, some people, you know, they get in their feelings. So how do you maintain that without being selfish? Yes, let's answer those ones for now.
All right, let me start with how to deal with people who don't share the same servitude ambitions as you do. Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's an interesting question, and I think context is also important, because sometimes, and I think this also touches on the conflict management question, but I'll get to the conflict management one. But what I want to answer about people who don't share the same serving ambitions as you, sometimes we misunderstand people's ambitions because we actually don't have open, honest, and frank conversations about our intentions. If we had those difficult and what I call crucial conversations, can you imagine a group of politicians sitting around a table in a conference and actually asking each other openly, honestly, and frankly what their intentions of being at that table are, what the actual end result of that conversation can be and can mean for everyone involved. So sometimes it's about asking people what they intend to do. And we also mustn't forget that we get into projects for different reasons. For someone else, getting into a project might mean putting bread on the table. It's not to say that just because your ambition is to serve only, you just want to serve, that the next person's ambitions of putting bread on the table are insufficient. So manage your expectations and also understand what the reasons for that next person are, because yours are not necessarily more important than the other. And I also believe that we want to do a lot of things as leaders. We want to be the ones to change people's opinion, to change this and to change that. Sometimes also being a leader means knowing when to back down, knowing when it's not your turn to change someone's opinion, knowing when it's not your turn to point fingers and saying so and so must fall, knowing that actually this is not my portion, and backing down when you have to. Yeah, I hope I've answered that question, but I believe at the root of it is managing people, managing your own expectations, and understanding people's rationale for being part of certain projects. And the question about conflict management in the workplace and how as a leader you should manage it, I believe in crucial conversations. I believe in having difficult conversations. With conflict, you can't always run away from it. Sometimes you're lucky and the conflict dissolves and dissipates on its own, but more often than not, you have to pick up the phone and have the difficult conversation. And sometimes it's also being mindful of the role that you have played in the conflict. I'll give an example. So I have a couple of students from one of the colleges in Johannesburg that are doing a work integrated learning project with my company. And one of them says sure I'm struggling to work with this girl. She's not coming to the party. She always wants her way. And then I said, okay, what do you think is the root of that? And we established on that phone call that these are two incredible leaders, but they're sitting on different sides of the same coin. The one leader values people's opinions and people's contribution to the project. And the other leader values time spent on the project. So she values that people work as swiftly as possible to meet the deadline, and she values that everyone is included. So she takes an inclusive justice approach. Which approach is better? None of them, because they're both brilliant. Those are both brilliant leadership styles. All they needed to do was come to the fore and say, how can we collaborate to make sure that our leadership styles get equal representation on this project forum? And so the question here is, are you having that crucial conversation with the conflicting party? And you realize that at the root of the conflict is actually one coin. You're just on different sides. So tackle it, talk to the person. Nothing beats talking. I hope that answers the conflict management. How do you handle self-care without being selfish? Well, there's no easy way of answering this one, but I want to go back to this slide here about the empty cup. And I think there's nothing more selfish than giving from an empty cup. It's this one over here. There's nothing more selfish to yourself than giving from an empty cup. Because what that means is you are at a point of depletion. There's nothing left in you, absolutely nothing, but you continue giving. So now you need to ask yourself, what exactly am I giving? And is it worthwhile? Because you do reach that point, though it may not be tangible, such as tea in a cup that you can physically see, but you know when you're running empty, you know when your tank is running empty. And now what you're giving is, it's disingenuous. So if you don't want to feel guilty about it, talk to people, tell them your approach matters. Talk to the people that you're serving and say, hey, look, on Sundays, I'm unfortunately not available because I'd just like to take some time out to myself. And I don't think anyone can fault you for that. If they do, then they are not worth your time. You just need to know when to draw the line.
No, I hear you. I totally hear you. Sometimes we do need to draw the line, and it's unfortunate, you know, with some people, it's very difficult because of how they will take it. But alas, we move on. So now one thing, we are kind of running a bit of time. So there's some questions that we will not be able to answer. We humbly apologize for that. What I will try to do is just sum up the last bit of things that we have. So the big one is, remember you were talking about Mahlodi in your serving and saving approach. So you know you can't serve or save without having a situation of getting to a point to say no. So this is the no questions. So Nicola Malgas has one question is saying that her problem is that they're always trying to, she always tries to save everybody, you know, and they have a hard time saying no. So her question is, how do you become better at saying no without feeling bad? And not only does it consume your time, but it can really drain you. Your opening question reminded me that we cannot pour from an empty cup. So Malga's question is, how do you become better at saying no without feeling bad afterwards? But that's not the only person that actually wanted to find out in terms of saying no. Ewan Gronia had another question on the tips of how to say no, because they often find themselves not knowing how to say no because, you know, of the guilty complex. So if you can just answer, how do you say no without feeling or looking bad? And while you're also answering the no question, if you can just touch on how can one implement a holistic development approach. And this was from Unosipho Matebula. And after you expand a little on how we can get a better holistic development approach, I just want you to touch base on time management, because a lot of people have a lot of time issues, and with the fact of now being under COVID, under lockdown, a lot of students are at home. And when you're a student and you're a youngin at home, you mainly do the chores. So how can we just go about with time management? And I want you to just close off by giving us materials that we will use. For example, what this was by Sean McKeely, is what type of material would you advise someone to read in order to develop their leadership abilities? And another, in terms of materials that we need, Sean wanted to know also, like, in terms of not only just leadership materials, but what can we learn? Where can we go to get stuff, to get sources of knowledge and wisdom, whether it be your journals or books? And do you see also the use, what do you use to help you make the decisions? Yeah. And then from there on, we will wrap up after you've answered all those questions.
Thank you so much, Tiamo. You've been an amazing host. Thank you once again to Natasha. I'm just making a note of the question. So the last one was materials. Okay, I'll end off with that one. Fantastic. Okay, let me start with, I am over here, so I've answered this one. Let me start with how practicing the art of saying no without feeling guilty. I want you to think about this before I answer it. And it's not a real life scenario, but think about it. Think about a time when you are bedridden and you can't move. So you wake up one morning and it's a normal morning, you have to prepare for work and you've got all these deadlines, and you try to lift your head from your pillow and you can't. Okay, you close your eyes again and you think, it's a no-brainer. I do this every morning. I just lift my head from my pillow and I move. I go with my day. And you can't. Now that scenario that I've painted sounds bizarre, right? But that's the situation that I found myself in. It's almost 4 years now. It was 2016 and I was in my honors year and there was so much going on. And I woke up one morning and I couldn't lift my neck off my pillow. It didn't move. So my shoulders had so much tension that they were starting to cause a pain up my neck and I just couldn't move. So this didn't make sense to me because I had never had problem with stress management or managing of myself. And I never complained about fatigue or anything because I just kept going. But that morning, I was stuck in bed, physically stuck in bed. I had to shout for my neighbor to call me. And now my door's locked, so now no one can get in. Now there's this hoo-ha. I was staying in res. Now there's this hoo-ha of people trying to get into my room because I can't move. I'm immobile. Now, I'm not sure if this answers your question, and it's probably a worst case dramatic incident that chances of it happening to you are close to none because our bodies respond differently to different levels of stress. But in that worst case scenario, think about yourself. Are you willing to compromise yourself and your own well-being to a point where you can't get out of bed and do a thing as simple as getting a cup of water? The reality is our bodies respond to stress, whether we acknowledge it or not. And that's where personal mastery comes in. It's being true to yourself, knowing that in as much as you want to be everything to everyone, you can't. You're a human being with a divine purpose, and it's your purpose. But you can't drive yourself to a point of carrying everyone on your shoulders to a point where you won't be able to fulfill your purpose. And that's the food for thought that I want to give you. Don't drive yourself down that black hole. It's not worth it. And like I mentioned in the previous answer, it's about your approach. No one can fault you for saying no if your approach is tactical. If you go to them and say, look, this is what I'm busy with for the next few days, and I won't be able to help you with this. Don't shut them out. Obviously, tact is very, very important. The way that you position your answer will determine the kind of response that you get. But ultimately, you need to practice the self-love. As leaders, we don't do this enough. We're out there serving the world, some of us saving the world, but who's serving and saving the leader? It's not worth it, guys. It really isn't. And this is a personal story for me because in the past 2 weeks, I've had to deal with a friend who's studying abroad, who had to be brought back home during COVID because he was no longer mentally leader, very well-known young leader who's serving and reached a dead end because he wasn't taking good care of his mental and physical well-being. So it's not worth it. Take bite-sized pieces and be authentic, be true to what you can do. So I hope that answers that question about learning how to say no. It's about being true to self, and it's about approach, the tact that you use in answering those questions. The next question was how to develop holistically or how to practice holistic development. So holistic development for me takes one being intentional about their lives. I'll use an analogy for this. You walk in one day, you walk into your house one day and you notice that the tap in the kitchen sink is leaking. So the tap is leaking, and it's just a small leak, you'll fix it. You don't attend to the leak because you think it's not that big of a deal anyway. I've got bigger fires to burn in another room. I've got to fix this other room. And that's what leaders do because we're so good at work and we're flourishing at work and we're flourishing in our community. But that tap is leaking in the kitchen, and the kitchen could represent your family. The kitchen could represent your finances. It could represent your physical well-being, your mental well-being. That could be the tap. But in the other rooms, you're doing great. Now, what happens to that leak over time? It can actually flood the whole house. And before you know it, you'll be walking into your house and the entire place is flooded. What happened? That one leak that you didn't address in January has overflown. It's August today. You still haven't addressed it. And now it actually is not going to wait for you any longer to address it. It's going to flow into other areas. So what starts to happen is that one leak in your financial well-being that you didn't address starts to affect your social life. If we're using finances as an issue, you didn't manage your finances, you didn't budget really well. And now as a result of that, you can't go out with your friends anymore because you don't have money. But that's a leak you could have addressed in January. It's August, bordering on September now, and the whole house is flooded, and it seems impossible to bear. So be intentional. Sit down one day and look at your life at a glance. If it's going to make sense for you, put it on a chart, a white chart, and write down all these 8 areas. I'll share them on my screen again. Okay, I've closed my presentation. I would have loved to share it on my screen, but write down these 8 areas. It's finances, social life, spiritual life, your vocation, your occupation, and write them down and take stock. Do an audit. It doesn't have to be detailed, but do an audit. How do I feel in this area? So you'll find that your leadership skills and where they are required is probably in one area. You're probably only a leader at work and you're flourishing at work. You're doing exceptionally well at work, but all these other 7 areas, nothing. So I think take stock by sitting down, plotting in each of those areas. So I hope that answers that question on how to develop holistically. The question about time management, it goes back to holistic development. And it's also intentionality. Are you intentional with how much time you spend in each area of your life? I'll go back to that analogy of the leaking tap in your kitchen. So you think that because one room in your house, and that one room is probably your vocation and your occupation, you're doing really well at is good. You haven't seen your family, you don't make time for friends, you don't have time for friends, and it's January. So you still have time to fix it, but you choose not to. What happens? That tap is leaking. What happens 8 months down the line? Someone in your family falls ill, something happens, and I don't want to err on the negatives, but that's what usually happens. And I actually want to make this example. The Black community will resonate with this. You'll resonate with the fact that as Black families, more often than not, I'm not saying all of us, more often than not, Black people gather and see each other the most at funerals than they do on their day-to-day lives. We don't call each other, we don't text each other, nothing. But when there's a funeral, lo and behold, everyone is there and we're catching up, and then we start making plans. Like, oh, we should go out. Yo, Kazi, long time no see. Yo, my cousin, I love you so much. Haven't seen you. But did it really have to take a funeral to bring us together? So the point I'm making about time management is be intentional with the amount of time that you invest in each of the areas of your life. If it means having a calendar, then have a calendar. If it means sitting down, opening your calendar and deciding that this weekend, I'm dedicating myself to being a leader in my family. I've called people to meetings, they don't show up. I'm literally going to start a braai at the house. Okay, it's COVID now, so please don't get into trouble. But I'm starting a braai, I'm starting a fire, I'm calling 5 people, and I'm taking leadership in this area. Then do it. It means setting up an appointment to go to the gym, or setting up an appointment to go for a run because you're trying to be a leader in your physical wellness. Set that appointment. If it means setting an appointment with a financial advisor because your finances are looking a bit worrying, but because you want to be a leader in your finances, set that appointment. Personal mastery is about intentionality and looking at each of those areas and being intentional about the amount of time that you spend. And when you do that, you'll realize that you have ample time. What a lot of us do is we spend 24 hours on one area. We spend our entire 24 areas developing one area. And now cumulatively over 365 days, all you've done was excel at work and at school. But there's all these other areas that are left needing and wanting of your attention. So the name of the game is intentionality. And I hope that answers that question about time management. And the last question was resources and materials that I refer to. So there's a couple. The first one I would recommend to everyone here is LinkedIn. And I know we're probably all professionals and leaders in our own right, but there's so much going on LinkedIn on various topics of leadership development that if you just search for the hashtag leadership on LinkedIn, so go into LinkedIn and in your search bar, go hashtag leadership. You'll come across blogs, content, anything and everything on leadership that real people are posting about. What I love about LinkedIn is its updated responses. So there are certain principles of leadership that I no longer ascribe to because I believe they are archaic, especially for an African context. So I love LinkedIn because it's real people that are engaging on real issues. So that's the first one. The second one is I follow Forbes.com. And it's a website. So Forbes.com is a website with blogs and content on varying issues in business as well as other leadership spheres. So if you're into business and social development, Forbes.com is the place to be for all those different topics. And maybe a book that I can recommend. Somebody asked about a book. One of my favorite African authors, he's only written one book, but he really is a gem when it comes to leadership in South Africa. His name is Bonang Mohale. Bonang Mohale. And he is the ex-CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. He is not only somebody that I admire and look up to and respect, but I think that he's got the most astute principles on leadership. And a couple of years, I think it must have been last year or the year before, he authored a book called Lift as You Rise. And in that book, he talks about this complex world of leadership and how we can approach a servitude attitude rather than a saving attitude. And to reiterate on that point, when you serve, you realize when your time is up. You don't have to keep saving everyone because you have to make enough time for your personal leadership. So Ntate Bonang Mohale, he's not so active on social media, but if I could recommend a book, I would say that's the book. A second book I would also recommend is a book called A New Becoming. A New Becoming by Dineo Molokwane. She's a South African author and she's a life coach, a transformational coach rather. And that book actually has exercises in it that you can do to work on your personal mastery. And I've realized after reading that book that I'm so much more equipped to leading other people because I lead from within. I start with me. So I would really highly recommend that book, Dineo Molokwane, A New Becoming. So I hope that answers the questions, and that's it from my side.
Well, thank you so much, Mhloli, for an amazing, insightful day. Thank you. And I just also want to thank all our attendees. None of this would have been possible without you. So thank you for giving us our time so that our speaker can drop some gems and some amazing knowledge. And from Natasha, also thank you from head office for allowing us this platform and to host us. So thank you also from head office. From me, from my team, Golden Key UWC, I thank you. I thank everybody. And this is good night, everybody, and stay safe and please adhere to all social distancing. And let's just be safe. Enjoy the rest of the evening and God bless.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Bye.